Okay, so we're in Yudalit Amid Beis. We're in the middle. I think we read the Mishnah, the middle Mishnah, but we'll read the middle Mishnah again. Beis Shammai Omer Me'in Meshalchin B'Yom Tov Elamanos. Beis Hillel Omer and Beis Shammai says you're only allowed to send food portions on Yantif. So Rashi says it's like already cooked meat or fish portions that are ready to serve. You don't have to do anything else to them. You could send even a lot. You could send a whole animal, whether it's a behema, whether it's a chaya like a deer, or a whole bird, or a fowl, whether they're alive or whether they're already shechted. So why does he say that? Beis Hillel say that because uh, number one is that it doesn't have to be fully ready because it could even be alive that they still have to shech. And number two is that it might be a lot more than is needed for the moed. If you send ready portions, like manos are portions, it's very likely you're going to finish it all up because it's portions. If you send a whole sheep, if there's not a lot of people at your house, you're not going to need the whole sheep for Yantif. So even though you're not going to need the whole thing on Yantif, Beis Hillel says because at least part of it could be used on Yantif, you're allowed to send that on Yantif. So whether the question is here, what's the problem? Is the problem that I'm saying yeah. So it has to be already cooked. Meaning yeah. Back to chocolate or about well we'll see the next, but yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. To send something on Yom Tov to someone else. On Yom Tov. Yeah. Except Yom Kippur. Right. But if it's food, people could eat the food that day. And if it's something else, you don't need to send it on Yom Tov. Yeah, you could send them ready to eat food because it's Yom Tov and they need to eat, so you're allowed to send ready to eat food. So that's considered L'tzorech Hayom. I could send them a new tie. I could send, well, I mean, I guess let's.
So I cannot supposed to send it, but I can send ready food.
Ready to eat food, yeah. So I think, was it from the earlier one, are we worried that you're sending, the Beis Shammai is a little strict that even though we learned a few weeks ago about mitoch, since you're allowed to do a certain act when it's part of the cooking process, you could do it even if it's not necessarily needed. You could send food, you could carry food that you need on Yom Tov. What if it's not exactly needed? So maybe you could say that this is saying he didn't ask me for it, but I could send it to him, and it's not a problem of carrying on Yom Tov, according to Beis Shammai. We are more lenient than Beis Shammai. Okay, then you're allowed to send wine, oil, fine flour. Solas is fine flour. What does he change it to there? And kitnios, avolotvua, but not produce, not a grain, an air of grain. So if it's already ground into flour, you could send it. But also in general, I guess we consider that it's a lot less work to make flour into bread than it is to send a chicken. And so this is an good question. It seems to be according to everyone. Rabbi Shimon mater b'tvu, and Rabbi Shimon allows you to send even like a whole air of kernels of wheat, because Rabbi Shimon says, Rashi says, you might throw the whole thing in and then smash it later into like grits. Gemara. Tani Rav Yechiel. Uvilvad. Yeah, Rav Yechiel is not too often in the Gemara, but Uvilvad shlo yasenu b'shura. So in this case, a shura means like a caravan. You can't send a whole bunch of people bearing gifts on your behalf to someone else on Yom Tov, because then it looks like a whole production. So Rashi says Avsha Milsa. Now Avsha Milsa we have in regard to Shabbos. Avsha Milsa means the noise is a concerning matter on Shabbos. So and it looks like when you're sending a whole so when Yaakov sent to Esav, he sent it messengers, he sent it spaced out. So when Esav was looking far away, you just see this, it looks even bigger than what it was. So if you're sending it in a big way, it looks like you're going to sell things to the market. And so that's the problem. Now, in regard to just Avsha Milsa, things that make noise on Shabbos are potentially usher. So I think Ramosha Feinstein is pretty strict that things that would make noise on Shabbos, even if you're not going to do a malacha for them to make noise, you can't do it because Avsha Milsa in itself is a problem. But that's not our Indian right now, but it's important just to mention that. So I don't. This is not exactly related, but it happened last week. Well, the first time I heard about it was the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. So they I don't know what was with the air raid sirens, but they would in Israel they would say they would have the radio. If you had to get into the shelter, they would send something over the radio. So what about Shabbos? So some poskim said you could have the radio on in the room you're not usually in, but you have to be able to hear it in case something goes on. But then they also had for religious people, they called it the silent radio stations, meaning it was always broadcasting, but it was always broadcasting nothing. And if there was an alert, then they would go loud. So you could keep it on in the regular room because it wasn't going to, and I think wasn't the code word Nachash Tzefa, or that was in case it was poison gas. Danny, do you remember from 1991 from Saddam? Yeah. Was Nachash Tzefa the code word in case there was poison gas or just for any incoming missile? I know you were here, right? But you weren't there. But Nachash Tzefa is like a poisonous snake, right? And that was the code word. Yeah. Nachash Tzefa. So last week, someone told me, I mean, he was here, but in case Israel was going to attack Iran, the Pikuda Oref, the Homeland Security was going to tell everyone, be very close to your bunkers, to your safe rooms, in case Iran is going to try to retaliate. So he said, I'm here, and I don't know if my app is going to work because maybe it detects that I'm not in Israel. So the same way I'm here, they may be some Iranians try to smuggle the phone in to hear Israel if they would get intelligence that way. I said, but we know from the beginning of the war when they're spoofing the GPS, the people in Tel Aviv, it said they were in Beirut. It was completely spoofed the GPS. So if they're going to be spoofing the GPS, I don't know how they could use GPS on the phone to say, oh, you're not in Israel. So it's not going to give an alert. So nowadays, they must still have it on the radio, but they also have it on their apps on their phone. Tana Rabbi Chaya said was sure. Tana ain't sure of Chus Mishlosha B'nei Adam. Yeah.
Can they use Shabbos Yom Tov for this?
Well, the thing is that we're allowed to carry on Yantif for food-related purposes.
But for this emergency.
Oh, for the emergency. No, well, Jews can do it. If it's emergency, Jews can do it. So the halacha is, and I think it's important to know, the Rambam says, I think it's in Hilchos Perek Beis of Hilchos Shabbos, when you have to be Machal Shabbos for a chola, you don't have a kid do it. You don't have someone of feeble mind do it. You have a gadol, respected, wise person do it to show everyone that we have to be Machal Shabbos in a case like this. So it's better not to do it that way. I mean, I think that David Applebaum, Hashem Yikam Damo, set up his term clinics that the Jewish doctors don't usually have to work on Shabbos, and the Muslim doctors don't usually have to work on their holidays. But there's not a problem if they had to. But that's a whole separate issue about nowadays about doctors, especially not in Israel. That's not our Indian, but it is an important thing. So Tana ain't sure pchusa mishlosha b'nei adam. When we talk about this line of people bearing gifts, this caravan, that means three people. It's not less than three people. So to send gifts with two people is not a problem. Three people, now it comes under the category of this caravan, and you're not allowed to send it on Yantif. By Ravashi asked, Klasa Gavri Klasa Mini, my. What if you have three people and three gifts, meaning each person is carrying one gift? Is that considered too big of a demonstration, or is it not a problem? So the Gemara says Teku. We don't know the answer. So okay, Rabbi Shimon Matar B'Tfur. Rabbi Shimon will let you send kernels of wheat, even, or maybe even if it's more than just a kernel, it doesn't have to be ground up into flour yet. Tanya, because you could throw it in the pot, or for us, you make a chalent, even though in their days they wouldn't make a long on Yontif, you're cooking for that day, so you wouldn't need a long. But to make some type of stew, maybe you'd throw in some grain to make it thick or something. I don't know exactly. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Matar B'Tvua. We learned in the Bryce, Rabbi Shimon allows you to send grain. Kigon chitin lasos mem ludius, wheat to make ludis, which is some type uh, 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 of cooked food that you put wheat in. So oron litin b'lifnei behemto, you're allowed to send barley because you can feed that barley to their animal. Adashim lasos behem resisin, and lentils to make some type of lentil soup or lentil. It's not a soup, but some food that's made out of lentils. So we're not worried that it has to be ground up for necessarily the most common use. So the most common use of wheat is to have flour. But it could be used for these dishes. Next Mishnah. Mishalch and Kalim, you could send, so Kalim means any vessels, but it also frequently in Mishnah Gemara means clothes. You could send clothes, bein tfurim, bein tfurim, whether they're sewn or whether they're not sewn. So the problem is that we're certainly not talking about just plain fabric. Plain fabric is not kalim. So what level of production these already have, I'm not exactly sure. That they're called already kalim, but they still have to need tefira. They need to be sewn more. I don't know exactly what the. Okay, and then we start here talking about shatnez a little bit. The alpha p sheish behem kilayim, even if they have wool and linen together in them, you're allowed to send it. V'hein l'tzorach hamoed, if they are needed for the yantif, and the Gemara is going to tell us what yantif means. I mean, what you could use shatnez for in yantif. Avalo sandal hamasumar, but you can't send shoes that have nails sticking out of them. Lahavdil, nowadays they would be spikes or cleats for sports, but not exactly, because we'll see that those had sharp edges that could hurt people with. Though that would be I don't think it would be, you could wear cleats or spikes on Shabbos for two reasons. One is that people think that you're playing sports, and I mean it may not be a diraisa, but it's of the dechol. And number two, especially if you're going to be walking on grass, then you have the whole shaila of you're making the famous case. If you drag a bench, you're making a ditch. So if you're stepping on grass with the cleats or the spikes in, what? Yeah, so the ice, that's a good question. I really don't know the answer to that. Uh and that would be different because it's not dirt, and also it's for safety reasons. I read some things that are extremely lenient in regard for for dealing with ice on Shabbos. I'm not really sure why they're so makel. I have seen opinions. I don't know the answer, except I don't think the issues would be. But also, well, here's what if you're wearing spike and well, so then the third question is the golf shoes nowadays, they don't make holes because or they don't make the divots. So in regard to that, that's not an issue uh because they don't make the divots, but it makes it look like you're playing golf on Shabbos, so that would be over the chol. It would still be usher, even though it's not gonna make any divots or holes. Now the things for the for the ice, the yak tracks or these other things, they look different. They're over your shoes, so and the only question is there some type of problem of breaking the ice? Um, actually, the when I told you I don't know what the heter is about dealing with the ice, I think part of the heter was they're dealing with usually places where it doesn't snow. When it does snow, they don't know how to deal and they don't know how to deal with it, and for them, it's more of a safety issue. And if that's the case, then it's definitely a safety issue for us. You can hurt yourself very badly if you're sleep on ice. But is that enough to wear some of these things on Shabbos? That I'm not sure of. But if it's not safe for you to walk at somewhere, don't walk. There's no, even though it's important on Shabbos, we mentioned the Ramban and Mikra Kodesh that on Shabbos and Yantif we gather in shul to daven and to read Torah. But if you have a risk of slipping on ice, that's a real reason you should be cautious. I'm just giving the general advice here. V'lo she'eno taf. Oh, so these were sandal. It says sandal, but it seems to be it could even be a shoe, not just Rashi says it was wooden. It's like a clag type thing. It's wooden and it was covered with with leather, and there were permanent nails in it. And the Chachamim said you're not allowed to wear them on Shabbos or Yantif because there was a case that there was once, I guess, a stampede on Shabbos. The Gemara Shabbos talks about that, and because of that, uh, you see, here's the difference, I guess, between Jews and not Jews. There was once a stampede. A lot of people they were actually when not they were hiding in caves. It almost sounds like the Hanukkah story. They're hiding in caves because of religious persecution, but then they got invaded, and in their rush to escape, there was a stampede and a lot got killed because the people were wearing these shoes. So I thought they used to make them the noise a little bit. Oh yeah. So so because we had a tragedy, we don't want to forget this tragedy that happened. So the Chachamim made a we don't wear these types of shoes on Shabbos because the original thing happened to be on Shabbos. Here, so it's a Mishnah on Samach Hamad Aleph in Shabbos. Lo yetze ish b'sandal hamasumar. So sandal masumar my time. It's interesting. Art Scroll doesn't necessarily have the same people doing the same stuff. So here they call it a sandal with spikes. Here they called it a hobnob shoe, hobnailed sandal or hobnailed shoe. So Shmuel said, Shilfe Hagzera Hayu, they were fugitives from the anti-Jewish decree. They were hiding in the cave. But Amru, they said, Hanichnas Yikanes, Vayotza Yetze. Anyone who wants to come in, come in, but once you're in, you can't leave. No one's allowed to leave. Napach Sandal Shalach Mehem. One of their shoes got backwards. And so when he came into the cave, the left footprints looked like someone left the cave. So they thought that someone had left the cave. An enemy saw, and the enemies were going to come. They pushed each other. And more of them get killed in this than what enemies kill. So again, I called it a stampede. I mean, that's not inconsistent with what it's calling. Rabbi Eliezer says They were in the cave hiding. They heard a noise on top of the cave. They thought the enemies were coming for them. So then they had the stampede. So it seems that the noise, so that's the second opinion, that the noise came from people wearing these shoes. Oh, so what I was saying is that it happened to Jews. So the Chachamim made a whole gzera. You can never wear shoes to not forget this thing that happened. And in Chicago, I think it's 20 years ago already, that the at some nightclub, was it the Excalibur, was it called? That there was some type of stampede. But we barely even remember that it happened now. But in the time of Chazal with this thing, they made a whole gzera that this incident shouldn't be forgotten. So the sound, I'm assuming you're not allowed to wear it on Yantif either because of the Gzera, so you're not allowed to send that. Lo minal sheino tafor, and not with the shoe that's not uh, fully sewn or not sewn at all. We'll see in the Gemara a little bit about it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af lo minal lavan, you can't send a white shoe either, b'nei shetzarach uman, because you need a craftsman to blacken it. I guess in those days there was only one colored shoe. Imagine what they would think about what's it called when it's the two colored. There's the light and the dark. The ones that uh okay, could be. I remember my father said someone went into the shoe shine place downtown and they refused to shine it because they didn't want to get the dark polish on the lighter part. The person says, I don't care, I needed V'zaklau, this is the rule. Kol shenei osin ba, what can be used beyond Mishachna, you're allowed to send it on Yantif. So we will talk about this klal in the Gemara. So okay, Gemara. Bishlam etfurim chazul l'malbish. Etfurim nami chazil l'ksuye. So these clothes, if they're sewn, obviously you can wear them already. So they're usable. If it's partially sewn, excuse me, if they're not, you could cover it. You could use as a blanket, this or that. But again, I'm not sure why if it's not sewn and it's just a bolt of cloth, then it shouldn't be called a kli. That part I don't understand. Ela b'kilayim l'may chazu. But what can you use kilayim for? You're not allowed to cover yourself with the shatnez blanket either. And if you think that you could use it as like a sheet underneath you, but we learned in the Brayso lo yala alacha. So the pasuk says ubeged kilayim shatnez lo yala alacha. It can't be brought up on you, or you cannot bring it up upon yourself. Aval ata yachol latzil tachtacha. You are allowed to put it underneath you, because the pasuk says that it can't be over you. The midiraisa, it's allowed to be underneath you. Aval amru chachamim asur lasos kain. Chachamim said you're not allowed to put it underneath yourself. Shema tikarach lo nima al besaro. Because maybe one of the loops of the fabric is going to wrap around you, and so it's going to be over you, not just under you. So Rashi brings two opinions. One is that it seems that some weaves are thick, and if one loop will go on you, it will warm you up a little bit. And the second opinion is even if it's a small, it's not a very big loop of the fabric, but since when it's the baguette is underneath you, it warms you up also. Even when this little loop wraps around you a little bit, it's gonna you get more hana from it. It's like warming you up. But it's clearly a derabanan. We're worried that this is going to happen. It's not shatnez diraisa, but it's a problem of shatnez derabanan. So what can you do with shatnez fabric on yantif? You can't even put it underneath you. The chitema did not. So now we're trying to give another possibility. And if you want to say, okay, I'm going to put that as my mattress cover, and then I'm going to put a regular sheet over that, so it's underneath me but not directly touching me because I'm separating it with something. The Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, but Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Amar le Rabbi Yossi bar Shal, Amar Rabbi Mishum Kahala Kadisha Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yossi bar Shal said in the name of Rabbi, in the name of the holy congregation of Yerushalayim. So it's worth it here. 27a note 17. So in those days, I mean, in this time, so Rebbe was already a couple generations after the Churban Beis Hamikdash. They have to leave Yerushalayim, but Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai already. The Sanhedrin, they had to flee Yerushalayim. Now they were up north in the Galil, but still they quote in the name of Kahal Kaddish of Yerushalayim. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, I think similar to the one was in no. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, it's talked about Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, or either older than Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, or Rabbi Yossi ben Meshulam. Okay, listen to this. Midrash Koheles Rabbah says, why are they called the Kahal Kedosha of Yerushalayim? Because Rabbi Yossi ben Meshulam and Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh would split their day into three portions: 1/3 to learn Torah, 1/3 for davening, and 1/3 for work. So I don't know if they're the Kal Kadosh because they worked or the way they split their day. Some say they learned Torah in the wintertime when it was too rainy and too wet and to do stuff outside, but they worked in the summer. So it seems that they were holy because they were able to work also, or they did work. So afilu eser matzah gabizu v'kalayim tachtehem asr lishon aleim. So even if you have a kalayim cloth and you have 10 non-kalayim cloths on top, you're not allowed to sleep on it. Even though we're not worried that it's going to be on top of you, but derabanan, it's not, you're allowed to do it. So what on earth can you do with the kalayim? Now, you might think, oh, well, wait, if I use it as an oven pot, a pot holder, well, that would also be also because even though normally we're worried about the kalayim warming you up, in this case, it's cooling you up, it's saving you from being burned. So you're definitely getting enough from that, right? So Ella bevilon, you could use it as a curtain. You could use the kalayim cloth as a curtain. The Amar Ula mipnei amru vilon tameh. But Ula said, why did the Chachamim say that a curtain can become tameh? So this, I think we read a few weeks ago. Well, remember, I think a couple weeks ago we had a case if the house had several windows. Yeah, we talked about in regard to Truma. If the house had several doorways and windows and they were all closed and there was a mason side and you had a kli under the lintel of one of these doorways. So we say the ceiling makes the tuma of the corpse spread all the way underneath that, but the doorways itself, it's kind of in the state of flux. We don't know which doorway you're going to take it out. And we mentioned if there's a window that's 4 tvachim wide, you could take a maze out of that, and then the stuff under the doorways aren't going to be tummy. Or if you open one door, then you know the tumah is going to go out that door, and the stuff under that lintel is going to be tummy, and the other ones aren't. I think we learned something to that like 3 weeks ago, right? So this is slightly different. So, but it's kind of related. That the walls of a house, the walls won't become tameh. However, if you have a curtain, it will become tameh. So why can a curtain become tameh even if you're using it a machitza like we have between the men and the women, or just stam? It's a divider. In the old days, they didn't necessarily have many rooms in an apartment, so you might split one off with the curtain. Nowadays, the hospitals are only one one, but when there were two or more beds in the hospital, they had the curtains between the beds, which there's visual privacy, but that's all about it. It was still noisy and this and that because of mipnei shashamish mischamim kenegdo. Sometimes the waiter is cold and he goes in the curtain to warm himself up for a few minutes. So if we want to say that you're allowed to use the kalayim, the shatnez fabric as a curtain, we know that we're worried, and we know that it's not. We're not worried. We know that the shamish, the waiter, sometimes warms himself up. So if we had that in the room, you can't use it on Yantav either because the shamish might warm himself up, and then he'll be over kalayim by warming himself up on the kalayim curtain. Yeah, but that's true. We're getting benefit, but it's not on our body. So it's because even though it's a warmth, but it's still a beggy climb. It's something that's on us. The question would be if you'd make an umbrella out of kalayim, then what? But the curtains that we were talking about, it's true, but we were saying it's almost you don't have a wall, you have a curtain, a curtain that's using as a dividing. And now we're turned to Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph. That's the two I thought you were talking about before, Danny. Tesvav Amud Aleph. Ella B'Kashin. So it's talking about very rough kalayim fabric that you can't really fold and use as a bag. So you don't want to be on Tesvav 2. You want to be on 1. Ella B'Kashin. It's very stiff fabric that is not going to be able to, if you put it, so Rashi says it's so stiff. So if you put it on he says leishiv. He doesn't talk about sleeping, but so you can put it down to sit on top of it. So I don't know if you think of like something like AstroTurf, the old, well, that stuff was kind of flexible, but it was very stiff. So we're not worried that it might bunch up over you. So there's a story, I think, with the Stipler when he was still in Europe. He was on a 3-day train and he didn't want to sleep, or he didn't even sit down because he was worried that the seats were shatnez. And I don't know if it was, a little bit fluffy, so he thought it was going to go over him. There's some story, I think it was with the Stipler like that, but it's been many decades since I heard the story, so I don't want to say it over on. So these are so stiff, rough things. Rashi says it doesn't, they don't make you feel warm. V'chiha, the Amar Rav Huna braid Rav Yeshua, and this is like we learned that what Rav Huna said in the name of Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, said, "Ha namta gamda danrash sharia." You're allowed to sit on the hard material from of Narash because it's very because Rashi says because it won't warm you up because it's so rough and it's not flexible like fabric. I guess it's thick and it's pretty stiff. Amra Papa Ardalayan Ein Behem Mishum Kalayim. Okay, so Rashi says, I saw in Chuvas Gaonim, which is a little interesting. According to Ramosha's cousin, Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, he hypothesized well, at the time there was absolutely no proof supporting this, but there's absolutely no evidence to the contrary. So he says, I can't prove it. Historians of the Gaonic period are going to have to find stuff, but here's his theory was that we know there were Surah and Pumbedisa, Surah and Naharda, two yeshivas of Bavel with the Gaonim, like Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Sadia Gaon. So he had hypothesized that that Rashi was like the second generation of people who left. There was an unknown third yeshiva in Bavel, and there was some type of disagreement of some sort. He didn't speculate what it was, and so they didn't just leave Bavel; they went all the way to the edge of Europe, to France, Germany, and Rashi was like the second or third generation of from those people. So so this Rashi this if he's quoting the Chuvas Hagaonim, that would seem that there was a little bit of now of connection between the Rashi's community and the Gaonim, which wouldn't fit so well. It doesn't disprove his theory, but yeah, but it's not Torah, it's history. What I'm just mentioning, that they used to put something underneath their shoe, and they put some type of so I don't know what he means by tiashim. In the Chumash, when we have tiashim, Chazal say that the tayash was a special animal that was only existed for the Mishka. The old Chumashim translated as sealskin, but it seems to be some type of waterproof thing. So I don't know exactly what animal he's talking about. The article mentioned something. What does the article mention? They say goat leather. I don't know. And then by their heel, they would put make it out of wool. So these were some type of I don't know why, but basically what we used to have the rubbers when it was snow or rain, we would put those plastic rubbers over our shoes. So this they would put under their shoe. I'm not quite sure why. If it was to save the shoe, I don't know. It doesn't say that. But those things, there's no kalayim. So I guess the problem is that this thing was made of what Rashi says the heel part was made of tzemer, and if other part of the shoe or the threads would have been tzemer's wool, so if the other thing would have been linen, you might think, oh, it's shatnez. No, but it's underneath you, and if it's under your shoe, it's not going to be warm and fluffy. It would be rough. So therefore, there's no problem with kalayim. So just like you could have something rough that's kalayim underneath you, you could have it under your shoe also. Amarava, Hanitzari, Dipshite, pouches that they would put coins in, Ein Behem Mishum Kalayim. So even though you hung it around your neck, and so it's hanging somewhere around your chest or whatever, it's not a problem if there's Kalayim. The Bizrani, so because Rashi says it's a little interesting, because the coins are inside, the coins make it hard and it doesn't make it warm. So is it that that the thing that makes it warm is the fact that it's flexible and you could take a different shape, but once there's these hard coins inside, it can't take other shapes because the hard things are not movable so much. I don't know if that's what he means or something else. But because of that, Rashi says it's not going to warm you up. The bizrane, but if these pouches that you put seeds in, I guess for vegetable or grain seeds, yesh mishum kalayim. Those pouches, if they're made out of kalayim, it is a problem. So you wouldn't be, I guess, allowed to wear it over your neck or over your shoulder. Ravashi Amar Echadzeh Ravashi says neither of them are a problem of kalayim because it's not the way you would warm yourself up. If I want to warm myself up, I would wear, a scarf. I wouldn't use one of these pouches. So even if you did use it that way, it's an abnormal use, so it's not a problem. About no, this isn't right now. This is talking about in general. So we got into the discussion. Why are you allowed to send kalayim on Yantav? So our final answer is if it's a very rough, hard cloth that's shatnez, you could put it on the bench, on your chair, and you could sit on it, and we're not worried that it's going to come over the side of you and warm you up. That was Yantav. Now we're showing that if it's something rough, there's no problem with it kalayim ever. It's not a shine. So this is saying if it's coins, well, it would be muktza on Yantav. Yeah. But we're saying during the week you could you could use the coin bag that's made out of shatnez because either it doesn't warm you up, or Rav Ashi holds it's not the derech of warming up, and there would be machlokas of Rava and Rav Ashi if it was the pouch that you would put seeds in. Rav Ashi would still allow you to use it because it's not the derech of warming yourself up with, and according to Rava, it is a problem. Okay, next two dots. Next thing in the Mishnah was vlo of a lobasandal hamasoma. You can't use a shoe with the nails sticking out. Sandal masuma my time low. Why can't you? Mishum ma'isa shahaya, because of the incident that happened. So we read already the Mishnah, the Mishnah and the Gemara in Shabbos, and it was either because the people that were hiding in the time of Shmad, there was the stampede, and they were killed because I guess they had these shoes on. But there was two different stories. What exactly was people hiding in caves? What happened that caused the I guess I should say, according to the Rashi, according to something Rav Yashaber that I think would have mentioned, if we would have known about it. He's mentioned things like this for Tisha B'Av. According to the first thing in the Gemara, they said you could walk to the cave but not away from the cave, but someone's shoes got turned around, so they were walking towards it, but their shoes were on front to back, so it looked like they were walking away. Mr. Fagan, Al-Vasham wrote about and mentioned about the case where a certain Pole got 11 kilos of sugar or 11 half kilos of sugar because there were Jews hiding in the forest, and they were well hidden, but they hadn't had food for several days. And one of them went out to get food, but it had snowed. So one anti-Semite Polish person saw the footprints and followed it back and found the 11 Jews, reported the 11 Jews, and his reward was either a kilo or a half a kilo of sugar for each Jew that he reported. So one of the tragedies, just like that was a tragedy, that's one of the things that Mr. Fagan said that he always says Yisker for, when he says Yisker for those 11 people. There were three other incidents he mentioned, but the same with Rav Yashaber in the Tisha B'Av shiurim that you give, he mentioned it a little different. He would say the stories of the curses in the Tochacha. We saw that the Ramban I think in Bechukosai at the end of Vayikra mentions that we saw in the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, or we saw in the destruction of what the first Tocha was, the first Beis Hamikdash, the second Tocha were the curses of the second Beis Hamikdash, the mothers eating their children, Lo Aleinu, this and that. And so also there's these other sad incidents that Chazal had to make a decree about. So Rav Yashaber mentioned the Holocaust also, that they would tie people up to the horse, and Lahavdil, in the time of the Romans, they would put live people on the back of the horse to be dragged through. The Nazis in some place, or their helpers, put Jews on the back of a car, the modern thing, and drag the bodies that way. Hashem Yikom Damam. Amar Abaye, Sandal Masum or Asulina Allah. So even though because of this Chazal, Gzeres of Chazal, we're not allowed to wear this type of shoe with the nail sticking out on Shabbos, Mutter l'tatlu, you are allowed to move it on Shabbos. Also, you're not allowed to wear it because of that incident and the stampede happened. When you're allowed to move it, it's not muktza b'diktani ein mishalchin, from the fact that our Mishnah said you're not allowed to send it as a gift, means that in general you are allowed to touch it. Because if it was completely muktza, you wouldn't be allowed to send it as a gift because you can't even touch it. Because if you would think that you're not even allowed to touch it, to move it, would there be any possibility that you're allowed to send it as a gift if you can't even touch it? No. So it must be. So he learns an interesting halacha from our Mishnah that it's not muktza. Yiddish cup, Gemara cup. Below minol sheno tafar, and you can't go out with a shoe that's not sewn. Pshita, a shoe that's not sewn is worthless, so it's muktza because it has no purpose. It's not even a shoe yet. How can you even call it a shoe? So Gemara says So no, we're talking about a case where it's not sewn properly, but there are some type of little pegs keeping the parts of the shoe together. So it's to some degree wearable. Rashi gives us another explanation that there's there's two there's two stitches in it, one in the front, one in the middle, one in the back. So it's clearly not finished, but I guess because of that little bit of connection, it's wearable. So still, you're not allowed to send it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Aflo Min Olavan, a white shoe. Tanya. So just an interesting thing because we talked about the people in the cave. So there seemed to be a thing against that the shoes had to be black. But it's interesting. The Gemara in Sanhedrin talks about in the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, where if they say, eat the cheeseburger, I'll kill you. You eat the cheeseburger, and you live to do more mitzvahs. However, we know that if they say kill someone or we'll kill you, or do avodah zarah or do gilei arayos, in those cases we say you have to be killed al kiddush Hashem, and we don't violate those mitzvahs. But in general, the Rambam, when he talks about it, if they say do the avera or we'll kill you, you do the avera, unless it's shvichus damim gilei arayos or avodah zarah. However, if it's a shas hashmad, if it's at the time where they're trying to get Jews to not do mitzvahs, even any little thing you let them kill you for because it's a shas hashmad. So not just the cheeseburger, which is not one of the main three averos, but the Gemara says I feel arsa de misane. It seems that the goyim wore red shoelaces and the Jews wore not red shoelaces, maybe black shoelaces. And if they say wear the red shoelaces like the goyim or not, we will kill you. So most learn from there that in the time of Shmad, even if it's not a purely halacha, even you have to be moser nefesh and be killed al kiddush Hashem. But that's the laces. Not talking about the color of the shoes, though. Once, someone who came frequently, this was a bunch of years ago already. He was he bar mitzvah already? He was wearing red shoes with red laces. They're with red laces. It came with red laces because they were red shoes. But how often do people wear red shoes? Do men wear red shoes to show? But it had red, and even if women wear red shoes, it usually doesn't have laces. But he had shoes that had red laces, but the whole shoe was red also. So Rabbi Yehuda Matar b'Shachar. Okay, Tanya, we learned in the Beitza. Rabbi Yehuda Matar b'Shachar. Rabbi Yehuda allowed you to send a black shoe because it's so even though it's not perfectly done, but it's it looks like maybe it'll look a little bit scuffed, but it's black like other shoes, so it's okay, even though it wasn't perfectly done. But he forbids you to send a white shoe because you need. So Rashi says something I don't understand. He says anything that when you mix it up, it gets thicker is called the Beitza, an egg. Just like I guess you, if when you crack an egg, you whisk it, it gets thicker. I know that it necessarily, I mean, it's thick to begin with, but that's what Rashi says about this. And gear, in modern Hebrew, gear is chalk, but in this case, it seems to be black chalk. That Rashi says it's some type of thing that comes from the earth that makes things black. So we think of the White Cliffs of Dover, but Rashi seems to be, I guess that's in Dover, but in Rashi's a French place, maybe there were black. There was black chalk. I don't know, but that's Rashi's telling us that's how they would. He's talking about what Rabbi Yossi was saying, which was in Eretz Yisrael, that they would put this black stuff over it to make the shoes black. Rabbi Yossi oser b'shachar mipnei shetzarach letzachzecha, and Rabbi Yossi even forbids you to send a black shoe. Again, it's black, but it's not perfectly finished black because you still need to smooth it out. Meaning it's like it's not smooth. It's lumpier or thicker in some places. So it's already made black, but it wasn't completely finished yet. Below pligi, but Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi aren't really arguing. Marki Asrei or Marki Asrei. One was talking about how they made the shoes in his place, and one was talking about how they made the shoes in his place. The Asrei Damar Bisra Latachas. In Rabbi Yehuda, in one master's place, meaning Rabbi Yehuda, the so when you had leather, obviously you have the hide side, the outside part of the leather, and the inside was where the skin was. We spoke about this like 5 weeks ago when we were talking about moving when you shafted on Shabbos. Excuse me, when you shafted an animal on Yantif and the hide. Beishamai says that it's muktza unless you have at least a kazayas of meat left on it. So the flesh side was down, and so the hide side of was on the outside of the shoe. So you didn't need to smooth it. Once you put the black stuff on it, it was good. Ba'asri Demar, but in the place of the other master, reading Rabbi Yossi, Bisra Le'el, they hit it up. They did it the other way, that the flesh side of the hide was outside, so that wasn't completely smooth yet. So even when you made it black, you still had to smooth it because that side was not as smooth as Rabbi Yehuda's leather, where the other side was out. Lahavdil, Dr. Seuss, the butter battle war. Who butters their toast with the butter side up and butter side down? That was about the arms race, according to my sixth grade teacher. Okay, 15A2, Zaklau, whatever you can use on Yantif, you could send. So the Gemara says, Rav Shesha tefillin b'yamatava. Rav Shesha is permitted the Chachamim to give tefillin to other people on Yantif, to send tefillin on Yantif. But there is a machlokus, but I think the Taz, the question is, so tefillin, clearly you are not muktza on Yantif, according to him, because you're allowed to move it. There's a machlokas of the Nosei Kalim on the Shulchan Aruch. If, let's say, you left your tefillin on the table on Shabbos, can you move the tefillin klachiyah, whatever? I think the Taz says you're not allowed to move it at all. They're completely muktzah. And maybe the Magen Avram or other Nosei Kalim say, yeah, you can move it klachiyah. But I think the Taz is very machmer and says you can't move tefillin at all. I guess he wouldn't pass me like Rav Sheshes, the Taz. But it seems that we do pass like Rav Sheshes in Siman Tav Kuf Tazayin, because I don't see any difference between Shabbos and Yantif. So we mentioned, what is it, last week only? We mentioned that Shabbos and Yantif are both an os, and so we don't need the os of, and tefillin is an os. We read in last week's parsha, in Parshas Bo. So you don't need the os of tefillin when we have the os of Shabbos. And the os of bris milah we have with us all the time. And that's one of the reasons that we celebrate a Shalom Zachar, because it's the first time the baby has experiencing any of the osos, because it's before his bris, and it's the first time he has Shabbos. So Amrle Abaye, so Abaye asked Rav Sheshes, how can you send it? The Mishnah says, Kol Shaneosin Bo B'Yomtov Mishalchanoso. Whatever you can use on Yantif, you could send. So, but we can't wear the tefillin on Yantif. Rashi points out that it's not a problem to wear tefillin. Where does Rashi say that? The inami manachlu b'yamtov leika isura. If you would put them on Yantif, there is no isur. Rashi says, I don't recommend, especially if you're near Hasidim or they don't even wear a cholamoy. So Shabbos, if you put it on Yantif, they'll think you're not Bikoris or something.
I was walking to school Hessner on Shabbos, and a lady comes out and there's a beer to throw him.
Right.
He said,
Can you bring this to the synagogue for me?
Yes, she
Right.
said, yeah, I found it on the ground. I said,
Oh, so that we're gonna read about this right at the bottom of the summit. Yeah, but
so I said, it looks like I can take it to from Shabbos. I said, you have to have it.
very good. So our Gemara is going to talk about that. So Hachi Kamar, this is what the mission means. It doesn't mean that you have to use it on Yantif in order to send it on Yantif. If it's usable after Yantif, you could even send it on Yantif. The Mishnah said, Kol sheniosim bo b'yom tov mishachnoso. Or here's the thing. So the phrase in the Mishnah is Kol sheniosim bo b'yom tov mishachnoso. Is there a comma in there? Abaye assumed that you read it Kol sheniosim bo b'yom tov, comma, whatever you could use on Yantif, mishachnoso, you could send. But we're saying no, Kol sheniosim bo b'chol, even as long as it's usable as it is right now. I don't need to do anything, process it anymore. It's usable now. The Yom Tov Mishachnoso. The way Argamar phrases it, Kol Sheniosim Bo B'chol Mishachnoso B'Yom Tov. But you could interpret it that he's saying Kol Sheniosim Bo even on the weekday, comma B'Yom Tov Mishachnoso. You're even allowed to send it on Yom Tov. Rabbi says, Tefillin Hovos Uliyadan. Since tefillin have come into our hands, since we're talking about tefillin, name of Milsa, let me say something about tefillin. Haya Baba Derechut Tefillin Barosho. If you were coming, you're on the road and tefillin around your head, B'shakal Avachama, and the sun was setting, Maniach Yaro Aleh Mach Megillah Beitza. You can put your hand over the tefillin so people don't see you wearing your shel rosh until you get home. So according to the first way, I'm going to explain it right now. It was coming to be Shabbos, and Rashi says, "Do we allow you to wear them because it's not normally if you carry something in your hand. So even though tefillin the normal way is to wear it, but it's considered carrying kalach yad because it's not the way. I guess in the Mishkan they didn't carry things by wrapping them on their body. So it's considered kalach yad. They let you, the Chazal let you keep it on until you get to your house. If you're sitting in the Beis Medrash learning and tefillin around your head, and Rashi says that the Beis Medrash was in the fields. It was outside the city, not far away, but it was out in the open, really. The Kiddush B'Kiddush Alev Hayom, and Shabbos was starting. So Maniach Yeroleh Mach Megillah Beso. So you can put your hand covering it so people don't see that you're wearing your tefillin until you reach your house. So so according to both of these the way I just explained it, they're both talking about Shabbos. However, some Rishonim asked, Kiddush Shalem Ayo means it definitely became Shabbos. The day was Chol. Now that the sun sets, now it's Shabbos, and Shabbos is holy. Shabbos is Kaddish. But the case of traveling on the road, it doesn't say Kiddush Shalem Hayom. It just says Shakal of Chama. The sun set. It doesn't say anything about Shabbos. I mean, the Kiddush Shalem Hayom, it doesn't have the word Shabbos, but the context is Shabbos because that's what's Kaddish. So Tosfos says that he's teaching us two additional halachos. One is, and we learned this when we did brachos, I think, maybe, is that there's a machlokes, is Lila's man tefillin or not? So it's a big machlokes. You showed him how we paskin. And how some Rishona paskin is you're not allowed to put on tefillin at night, but if you were wearing them already during the day and now it's night, you can keep them on. You don't have to take it off. Whereas some Rishonim, and maybe this is the Rambam's opinion, I don't remember exactly who, if Lila's not Zman tefillin, even though if you're already wearing them, but now the sun is going down, you have to take them off. You're not allowed to even keep them on at night. So Tosos mentions that in the first case, you're going on the road, so it could be that he's teaching us that Lila is not Zman tefillin. Then Tosos has a different question. Well, if according to him that it's not Shabbos, then what's wrong with taking out and carrying them? It's not Shabbos, so you can carry them in your hand. What's the big deal? So he's worried that he's going to drop it or something. And then the second halacha is telling us that it's Shabbos, and it's also teaching us that you're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbos. It's not just a thing it's not that the lessons it's teaching us isn't just that you're allowed to wear it at home and it's kalach yad. but also you're not supposed to wear tefillin on Shabbos. Labzman tefillin. Now the thing that's not clear, Rashi said by Yantif, manami manach luhu b'yantif leki surah. There's no isser if you would have put them on Yantif. Mistama, there should be no difference between Shabbos and Yantif. And that's why I say that the Taz, that there is some level of muktza, but we understand why there's no why. So I think when he says Isura, he must mean there's no Isur D'Oraisa. Clearly, I mean, because you don't need to, they are muktza to some extent, either like the Magen Avraham that you need the place, you can move it, or like the Taz that it's super usher, you're not allowed to move it at all. Like you have a very valuable telescope or camera with a lens, not like our phones that are very durable, even though they take very good care. But it used to be when I was a kid, not so long when I was a teenager, you left a fancy camera out with the lens on it. That was a very valuable thing. So it was muktza because of what Machmas and Kiss. It was a very valuable thing, a very valuable piece of equipment. And now our phones cost more than that, but they're much better, but they're much more durable. You drop it on the floor and it's fine. Progress, huh? Speaking of which, just because today's the day, today was the anniversary of the Challenger blowing up, the space shuttle. I heard from a student of Rabbi Juzint, who's in Massachusetts. I can't remember his name right now, but he said the day he was in Rabbi Juzint's class that year, and the day after it happened, Rabbi Juzint basically took a moment of silence that these people who were trying to make the world a better place with their scientific exploration were killed, and he took a moment of silence. And I was never in Rabbi Juzint's class, but Rabbi Juzint, and I heard this directly from Steve Landis and from other people, though, Rabbi Juzint used to count, he would keep track of the time that they wasted in class. So the fact that Rabbi Juzint, after the end of the year, said we wasted 2 minutes and 3 seconds, to take a moment and say, for that, so he held it was a very important thing. I'm not saying he wasted a full minute. I doubt he did, but that was an interesting thing, and it's in Yana Dioma. Okay, Masavla, if you're on the English article, we're on 15A2, the last line of the first column. Masav Rav Huna Breda Ravika, Rav Huna Breda Ravika asked, Haya Baba Derech Barosho, if you were coming into the city, you were on the road, and you're still wearing your tefillin, the Kiddush Mayom, and the sun goes down, so now Shabbos starts. Menech Yeru Alehem, you cover your hand over them so people don't see you're wearing tefillin. Until you come to the house, the first house inside the wall of the city. You have to leave it there. You're not allowed to go all the way home. If you're learning in the Beis Medrash and you lost track of time, and now it's Shabbos, you cover your hand over your tefillin until you get to the first house that's closest to the Beis Medrash, because the Beis Medrash itself was open, so you go to a house, so that has some level of security. But according to that Brisa, you're not allowed to go all the way home. How come Abaye said that you're able to go all the way home? So the Gemara says, Lo kasha, hadamintara, hadlamintara. Where you have to leave it in the first house once you reach the city, that's because that house is a safe, secure place to leave your tefillin. And where it says you can take it all the way home is where the house in the first place in the city is not a safe place to leave it. Mintara is like shamur. It's okay. Elo mintara, my area barosho. If it's not guarded, a safe place, why does it say the tefillin are on your head? Afilu machtan ba'aranami. So this is what it's a little bit different than what your case. If you found them on the ground, also you have to pick them up on Shabbos. Hatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, hamotzi tefillin. If you found tefillin on Shabbos, and you're in the middle of, it's not near a house. Machnis and zug. So if you find several pairs of tefillin, you could put on one pair of tefillin at a time, and till they're in a safe place, so that it won't be bizayon to the tefillin. So I guess in those days they didn't have Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. If you did, you could wear two pairs at once. So we see that even if you weren't wearing tefillin, but if there's a need to move the tefillin on Shabbos, you're allowed to wear the tefillin on Shabbos because moving them is kalach yad. I mean, because carrying something while you hold it is not kalach yad. I mean, the Gemara talks about the way that that tailors, I forgot where it says, where they would stick needles, so that was the normal way of carrying their needles. So that's a malacha because that's a normal way of moving a needle. But to to wrap something on you, it isn't. Now, in Israel, well, let's put it this way. Even some of the delivery guys, it doesn't happen that much here, but sometimes you see it. But in Israel, it's much more common. The refrigerators are a little smaller than our big ones now. A guy they have straps, and a guy puts the refrigerator on his back and he's walking like this, not very far, but they tie the refrigerator to them when they're moving.
Yeah.
And right, so I'm saying here, depending on the size of it and where it is, sometimes they carry it also. But also now sometimes they have two of them and they each have a strap and it's underneath. So that's not exactly tied to them. But I'm saying the other guys, they strap it onto the back and they carry it. But that's still not the normal way of carrying a refrigerator. So as we turn to 15A3, Lokasha, it's not a problem. So if it's not guarded, well, we know that you're even allowed to put on the tefillin. You're allowed to put on tefillin that you find on the ground. So here you're wearing the tefillin. What's wrong with why does it have to be that the tefillin are on your head? Because even if you'd find it, Abai should have said a bigger chiddush. If you found tefillin, you could wrap them up and wear them, you cover them. So the Gemara says, Lokasha, machmas ganvi umachas kalvi. Where you had to leave the tefillin in the first house, that's where that house is guarded from thieves and also from wild animals. I mean, there it says dogs. The mintra machmas kalbi. The place where you're allowed to wear it all the way home is where the first place it's safe from wild animals of a lo mintra machmas ganvi, but it's not safe from thieves. Mao the same of listim Yisrael ninhu lo zalzi behu. You might think since let's say in this city, it's a Jewish city. So if there's a thief in the city, who's the thief? It's going to be a Jewish thief. So even though it's a Jewish thief, you might think he's not going to mistreat the tefillin. Kamash Malana by saying no, you're allowed to take the tefillin all the way home on Shabbos. Hadran alach Beitza. We will return to you, Beitza. We finished the first parak of Beitza with Hashem's help. I thought we were going to have more time to get into the second thing, but the beginning of the second parak it starts talking this discussion about an Erev Tafshilin. If Yantif is on Friday, you're not allowed to cook from Friday into Shabbos without making Erev Tafshilin. So the first pasuk it's clearly a Rabbanan thing, because if it was usher to cook on Friday for Shabbos, Chachamim couldn't make some mumbo jumbo up to allow a diraisa. So the Gemara has two psukim. What's the source that the Chachamim saw that they're allowed to make a heter for us to cook, even though in general we're not to? The first pasuk that says Zachar Shabbos Hakacheo, because remember the Shabbos day to keep it holy, you have to do something special. I'm not reading the Gemara inside, but keep the Shabbos holy. So by the fact that you did the Erev Tafshilin, you made a food, you're going to remember Shabbos and not forget it in the craziness of Yantif. But then later the Gemara brings a different pasuk, and that's from this week's Parsha B'Shalach by the Mon. That's why I just wanted to talk about that right now. The pasuk there is Rabbi Elazar said, because the pasuk says, "Eis asher tofu efu ve'eis asher tavashu b'shelu." So when Moshe told them about the man, and that double portion is going to come on Friday and not on Shabbos, that which you want to bake. That's what you want to cook. Mikan Amar Rabbi Lazar, from here Rabbi Lazar or Rabbi Eliezer, the Gersa changes to you could only bake for Yantif if you're ever ready a baked thing that you made as your Erev Tafshilin, what we call Erev Tafshilin before Yantif, and you're allowed to cook unless you cook something before Yantif. Mikan Samchu Chachamim Le'Ruve Tafshilin Min Torah. That's where Chachamim had a place to lean the idea of Erev Tafshilin in the Torah. So because that's in this week's Parsha, I wanted to mention, even though we didn't get there, So Rashi says the pasuk could have just said, Moshe could have told them, you can bake and cook. How come he says Eis asher tofu efu? He just said today, bake and cook. So it's a hint that there's going to be certain Fridays where you're not allowed to cook for Shabbos. And that was if without making Erev Tavshilin. So God willing, we'll start the second parak next week and have a good rest of the week.